All right. Good morning. And this is a paid political program on WJOB 1230 M 104.7 FM. And we are talking to none other than Jerry Williams, a candidate for Lake County Sheriff. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
And I want to talk to you about why you're running. And let me just begin by asking you to kind of introduce yourself to listeners and viewers who probably know the name but don't know the background. So
Right.
can you talk a little bit about your qualifications?
Absolutely. So I'll start off, and I want to make sure I got this mic is wherever you guys need
Mic
that.
works well. This is a
Good.
lot better than the old headsets.
Right. Good deal. Good deal. Well, first off, again, Jerry Williams. I grew up here in Gary, right there on the east side near Emerson High School. Me and my dad and the rest of the siblings, we moved there probably in the late 60s, right after my mother passed away. And so there was 7 of 12 of us still at home at the time. So my dad had the challenge of raising the 7 of us that were still underage by himself, and became he truly was our hero. The way he handled himself, conducted himself in the community, and we missed that touch and that understanding of what a mother's love is. But boy, he did a yeoman's job trying to fill both voids, and so I like to give reverence to him throughout that process.
Yeah, I have a similar story. One of 6 children raised by my mother, and you learn those family values too.
You do.
From those types of experiences. So,
Absolutely.
family values obviously got you started.
It did.
And then
It did.
you went into law enforcement.
Yeah. Well, what helped get me that built my foundation. So I always got to give a shout out to my family because they are they are my rock. To be quite honest with you, my wife Doris and I graduated from Horseman High School, and 7 kids, 4 boys, 3 girls, and 3 of my sons are police officers as well. One here in Lake County, and I have identical twin sons that are both troopers out of Indianapolis.
Wow.
And so we have a host of them. They call us the new version of Blue Bloods, right?
So including yourself, 4 members of your immediate family are in law enforcement.
Yes.
Wow, that
Yeah.
says a lot. That says a lot. That's one of those aspects of your qualification that I don't think anybody else is going to be able to match.
Yeah, some of that's probably because I'm probably the oldest of all of the candidates too, as well. Because my twins that are the youngest of my sons, they've been troopers now for 13, almost 14 years. So
Wow.
I started to date myself a little bit in that respect. So
a little bit.
Yeah.
So you obviously you were an Indiana State Trooper.
I am still currently.
Yeah. And you've been in law enforcement now how many years?
Total of about 35-ish years. I started out as a correction officer with the Lake County Sheriff Department, and after spending a few years there, and which really established a base of how to treat people and how I conduct myself even today. And then this is my 33rd year with the state police.
And you currently you've held some pretty impressive positions too in law enforcement.
Yeah, so I've been very blessed throughout my entire career to include, obviously, I did my road patrol time here in Lake County. I spent about just shy of 10 years as a trooper here working in Lake County in and of itself. I was one of those fortunate ones that was able to come back home and not go to another area within the state. So being able to come back home and work as a trooper here in my own backyard was definitely one of the highlights of my career. And then I progressed on up. I worked on task forces, federally led task forces for doing gang investigations, homicide investigations, undercover work, and the likes. And then eventually began to get promoted up through our ranks to the rank of major that I hold now. So I've held the rank of sergeant. Went down to Indianapolis, worked on contracts and grant writing in our fiscal division for about 2 years there. And then from there, I transitioned and I kind of got sent in other areas. You kind of wherever those needs and expertise was, that's kind of the way the path took us. So then I spent another year working in human resources, writing our and structuring our hiring processes, recruiting processes back then, what we call a lateral program today, where you take officers from other agencies and you put them into a modified program to bring them onto your agency. So was one of the catalysts that did that, and then spent about a year working with Department of Corrections to help with some training there and setting up what now is their police or armed force within the Department of Corrections for the state of Indiana. And then eventually was promoted to the rank of first sergeant, where I spent a few years working in internal investigations, doing EEO investigations across the state of Indiana. And so having an understanding of that accountability, that transparency of how to police yourself as an agency, which is, of course, one of the bedrocks of for us as an agency itself. And then eventually promoted to the rank of lieutenant, where I got an opportunity to come back home here as the district commander. And what's unique about this area, what's called the Low District, is that this is probably one of the diverse and second largest districts within our portfolio, 7 counties to include Lake County. So having an understanding as a commander of how to administer public safety resources, whether I'm in an urban environment in Gary and East Chicago to the most rural environments of Stark and Pulaski County, knowing and understanding how to meet each community individually and collectively, how to leverage those resources to make sure that you bring to bear what those communities might need from a state police platform. And so it gave me that understanding. And then eventually I was promoted to the rank of major. And I sat on our executive staff for about just shy of 12 years, just around 11 and a half. I was then invited down to our executive staff by then Superintendent Carter of the State Police and now former Vice President Pence. Mike Pence invited me down, and I joined our staff, and I worked in our logistics section. Why is that important? Is because it gave me I have an understanding of how to deal with complex issues as it deals with budgets. I managed over $400 million in daily assets, to include all of our assets when it comes to cars, guns, helicopters, new construction. A new construction building that you might see now at State Road 2 and 65 is one of my projects, along with 2 other construction projects. So I understand large-scale infrastructure projects and how to manage those to bring them in on target and under budget, because as you know, Indiana likes to be able to have that surplus, and so making sure we manage that in that respect.
Well, let me just say, you mentioned that you've done grant work, you've done human resources. Those are all administrative. Those are all administrative skills that you need to be the sheriff of Lake County, because the Lake County Sheriff's Office is a huge operation.
It is.
And so, all of these skills that you're talking about are applicable directly to that position.
Absolutely, it is. And then you got that aspect of what I like to call the crime fighting component of it. So back here in, I think, 2022-ish, with a request from then Mayor Prince to Governor Holcomb and Superintendent Carter, asking for some help with the agency. And so I was tasked with coming into my own community, which was, of course, a blessing, and being able to work with those great men and women of the Gary Police Department to include becoming the interim police chief, again, managing at a much larger scale. Of course, Gary Police Department is the second largest police department in the county. And so spending that 18 months, 6 months as the interim police chief, helping to do the best we can to help manage all aspects of a police operation. So the next question is, why me? The why me is because as an agency, we already did that, as we were considered, or still considered, one of the leading state police agencies in the country that have went outside that comfort zone. Most state police and highway patrol agencies don't like to engage in local matters. It's just not one of those niches they like to be in. But Governor Holcomb and Superintendent Carter were a little bit outside the box thinkers in that respect, and they didn't mind taking risks to engage in communities and figuring out ways to help out more intimately. So we did that across the state, and not only across the state, but across the country, working with the Michigan State Police to do similar programs and efforts with Detroit, Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, Illinois State Police, where we worked with our neighbors and still work with our neighbors with Harvey, Illinois Police Department to help them restructure and bring some best practices within those agencies. So managing police agencies at a much higher level than most candidates could understand. I'm just fortunate enough to have that exposure and that experience.
So what would you say is the most pressing public safety issues facing this county?
No question, fighting crime is always going to be number one for law enforcement in and of itself. Making sure and how we manage that law enforcement component is really having a targeted approach to it. for that small percentage of bad guys, as I like to describe them, that want to prey on us and make the rest of the community victims, making sure that we use smart data to target those individuals to get them out of our community, and as importantly, figure out ways to keep them from returning into our criminal justice system is equally as important in that respect. And then we can't leave out our jail. Again, I'm passionate about the jail because I spent several years there, and so I hear from the officers about the conditions that they have right now, the working conditions, working 16 hour shifts, mandatory, people losing their families because they can't get away from work, and the working conditions doesn't appear to be conducive for a healthy working environment. And so having an understanding of how to address those issues firsthand after working with Department of Corrections, being inside the jail itself for several years, I know how a smooth operation worked for me, now dated 35 plus years ago, but I understand how a cohesive environment should be working inside that jail, all the way up to include the warden of that jail, and of course the sheriff of the agency itself. So having that real life experience certainly gives me a leg up and understanding what it should be and what it needs to be going forward, along with working with some other agencies across the country to do just this very same thing, to include recruiting and the likes when it comes to corrections.
So you're a career law enforcement member. You're not a politician,
I am
okay?
not.
And so why at this point in your career did you decide to want to run for Lake County Sheriff?
Probably first and foremost, I am, people says, Jerry, be careful, don't bring religion into politics. Well, I'll let those folks that make those statements. What led us here was prayer, first and foremost. My family and I and my wife praying on this process when I began to see and have folks approach me about, hey, we can do something bigger and better here in our community. And Lake County deserves a leader that understands complex investigations, understands complex high level management and transparency when it comes to managing operations at a higher level than most folks could say they have experienced, like I have in that respect. So just bringing that accountability, and at the end of the day, I love my county. I just spent off and on the last 17 years of my career with the state police, traveling back and forth to Indianapolis. I live right here locally in Lake County. Now, the state police affords me the opportunity to move just about anywhere in the state that I choose to, and still work in the capacities that I do. It was intentional to stay home. One, I wanted to be close to my family. One of my seven kids, my oldest daughter, passed away in 2019.
Sorry to hear that.
Very sickly, thank you. And so me and the wife, there was no question that we wanted to stay as closely connected to her and my grandson Jeremiah as we humanly could do. And that's what we did, to include taking care of my mother-in-law and taking care of my father and my siblings, because I know they would have did the same for me. I carry a lot of titles, Mr. Tom, but one of the titles that's most dear to my heart is that of a caretaker. God blessed me to be able to physically and financially and have the ability to take care of those folks around me that took care of me along my path in
Well,
life.
your words kind of come full circle to where we began, because you talked about the impact of family and your upbringing.
Yes, sir.
How do you build community trust while ensuring basically professionalism in law enforcement? It's a balance. I mean, this day and age, we're so divided on so many issues, and even law enforcement has come into question. I grew up in the 1960s, and the idea was, police were always your friend, and that's not the value that some people have these days. And at the same time, there are those who promote these agendas of, well, we'll defund the police, we're going to cut back, and we
Right.
don't need the police, and that's not the answer either. How do you handle that? I mean, as county sheriff, you're basically the you know the most high profile law enforcement officer there is in the county.
You are. Good question. So this is what I would tell you about that, is that first off, enforcement and community are not opposite. They go hand in hand. You should be able to manage within an agency with a level of accountability and transparency and consistency. And if I do that and I be intentional about engaging with my community, that's how we build that trust. That's how we build that community that then relies on us and we can then rely on them. And I promise you to make our community safer. I've been a part of those types those environments, and I know it's effective and it will work in the future.
When you look at Lake County, you've got, you've got communities, Whiting, Hammond, East Chicago, and Gary. You go all the way down to Lowell and Schneider. There are some real differences in the needs and demands. Everybody wants to live in a safe community, but the needs and demands that, say, a large department like Hammond would have, okay, from the county, is totally different than maybe the needs of Schneider or Lowell or Whiting. How do you see yourself handling those diverse differences in law enforcement that exist and the needs that you can provide?
Good question. The same way I did it as the district commander here. Again, what you just described is exactly how I had to manage as the district commander here with the second largest district. Being able to meet each of those communities, whether it's urban or rural, where they at. Meet them and bring those resources to them. I mean, that's what my charge is from the superintendent in that role, is to be able to represent him, represent the governor, and meet every community, whether I'm in a cornfield in Newton or Jasper County to the most urban environments of northern Lake County. You have to be able to manage those resources. So I understand that. I've done it. I have proven accountability and success with managing at that level and bringing that to scale here with the sheriff department.
Um, 20 years ago, I can remember, that there used to be a ratio of 20 and 30 candidates, for, one opening on local police departments. That's not the case anymore.
Right.
There's been a big change, but you've basically, found success even in your own personal life. The fact that you have 3 children that are now, of course, adults, and they're in law enforcement. What's the secret? How do you bridge the, reluctancy of younger generations wanting to go into the career of law enforcement? Because, as you said, you've got this huge department, and it's not just police officers, it's also correctional officers and all the support staff. How do you envision your role as sheriff getting people to want to go into a career in law enforcement?
Good question. So leading from the front, you have to be engaged in this capacity, whether I'm in my current capacity where I sit as one of the highest ranking officers with the state police, being intentional about engaging. I did the same thing during my time there briefly with the Gary Police Department. It was a very focused effort to make sure we engage and build confidence and trust with the community that we are who we say we're going to be, and that you can count on us to bring that public safety that you deserve within the community itself. So I don't think that is going to be rocket scientist in that respect. It is really just who you are. I've spent my entire career on public safety and been a public servant. And so that means you're always trying to do something bigger than yourself. This is personal to me, making sure that I can bring back something home here that I believe not many people can bringing it at a scale that I can go into this environment with the sheriff department and begin day one to understand what needs to take place and have that proven record that not only theoretically to say I've done know what it is, to understand what it is, and to have done it at that large scale. I've just managed at a larger level than what most folks in this arena can describe, and I say that humbly, but it's just the facts and the truth. It wasn't by accident that Superintendent Carter and Governor Holcomb said, "Hey, Jerry, you're the person that we need to go do this." Not just here in Lake County with the Gary Police Department, but with the Illinois State Police, Michigan State Police, Ohio Highway Patrol, working out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That wasn't by happenstance. It was because they felt I was the person that not only could bring to any of those environments the administrative high-level understanding, but the crime fighting component of it as well too, which is one of the things that we worked on when I was at home with my men and women at the Gary Police Department, was a crime reduction plan, something that's tangible, that you can measure, and that so when I walk away from this role as the sheriff, that I can look back and know that you, as the voting public, will be able to say, he did something different and better with the sheriff department to make our community, make Lake County safer. And I'm confident that we can do that with the experience that I bring to the table, and the fact that nobody will work as hard as Jerry Williams, and nobody will care and be as passionate about our community, because I'm gonna treat it like it's my own family, and you ain't gonna get no safer than that.
Well, yeah, you brought up a lot of different skills today. Again, you've been involved in so many facets of law enforcement. If you had to um, identify one skill or one experience that you think really sets you apart or prepares you for this position, what would it be?
Probably two things, and that is the administrative component of it. Nobody has managed and have the proven success at the level I have with police operations. You know, managing budgets and specific to those responsibilities. So it doesn't matter what it is, but understanding that and fiscally having that fiscal responsibility and integrity to do it at the highest level, to make sure that the community understands that they hold me accountable for every action, that I create a platform with transparency so everyone understands what we'll do and how we'll do, making sure that the officers understand that we will work and I'll support them 110% to include not only the corrections, making them a part of that consistent platform, but the civilian support staff. Because at the end of the day, the more safer, the better trained they are, the better they perform for you in the community. So when they're rendering service, whatever that service is for the community, they can do it much better and more effectively and efficiently. And that's one of the things that we bring to that table. The crime fighting is you can't, it goes hand in hand with that. Understanding, again, working with different agencies, the complexities of fighting crime when it comes to drugs, fentanyl, and those things that affect our community in public and in private, you know, suicides, etc., mental illness, not only within our communities, but also with the within the agencies itself, with the police officers, making sure that they have all of the resources necessary to be as effective and healthy themselves. I think it goes hand in hand. I don't know if I could leave that out of that whole process. So those things really, really help us help define why I probably come across, and rightfully so, as the most highly qualified candidate, because I bring those resources with proven experience behind me that says, yeah, I've operated not only at this level, but probably at one of the highest levels in this process in and of itself, to include managing agencies and helping other agencies do this, do the like and the same. It's just hard to match that.
Well, there's so many facets and so many aspects of the county sheriff and the responsibilities that the sheriff has. It's a conversation that has to continue, and the good news is I believe we're going to continue this conversation
We
again
will.
next week, same time. And you've been listening to a paid political program on WJOB with Jerry Williams, who's a candidate for Lake County Sheriff, and again, we'll pick up the conversation next Wednesday again at 7:35. So
I
look forward
appreciate
to
you.
it. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
I appreciate the time.